Morrowind is a game that is easy if you already know exactly what you need to do and exactly where everything is, and you don't need to wiki everything because there are things that you can miss and lock yourself out of. People have said to me they find Path of Exile 1 difficult because it's a game you have to play with either advanced knowledge of what you're about to do or the wiki open at the same time. And I still believe that the sphere grid, if you will, on Path of Exile 1 is intimidating the first time you see it, and you really do need to kind of know where you're going to go to. What checks and balances, what measures are you putting into Path of Exile 2 that's going to help keep a player in the game instead of them feeling that they need to go and search for outside knowledge?
That is a very, very hard question. Now, it's funny because one of the very first videos I ever saw of yours was the YouTube short where you opened the Path of Exile skill tree. And the thing you first said was,
the idea of
it was something like you said something along the lines of, I don't like it when games have all the complexity up front rather than having it so that the game evolves over time and gets more complicated as you go through it, which I don't actually disagree with, by the way, as a point. But okay, here's a random anecdote for you. I feel like I'm way off topic. Whatever, we'll just do it anyway. When before Path of Exile 1 shipped, actually not very long before it shipped, I had a thing that I was pretty in favor of. Chris was very much not in favor of, and I was convinced to go the other way with it, for probably good reasons, which was that should there be Fog of War on the passive skill tree?
Oh, okay.
So this was a idea that we're like, okay, well, first of all, anyone who opens the skill tree, the skill tree will just be online. It'll be there, right? So having Fog of War on it won't change the fact that you could still plan a build.
Maybe right? As a tutorial, like a smaller separate tree, or the first few bits as a tutorial, and then when you've taken 3 or 4 steps, it opens up.
I mean, I was literally suggesting at the time that we just have it so that, just like how it works in an RTS game, right? Where you can see a certain distance from the node that you've got that you've allocated. So effectively, you don't know what you're going to find until you get there. Now, I don't think this was a good idea by any means now, really, because you do need to have goals. There's a lot of other things going on and so on. But that was the thing, right? And that was an attempt to solve that problem of can we make it so that the passive skill doesn't seem so complicated when you first open it? Now, the other idea I came up with when that idea was bad was, okay, should we have an unlock system whereby sections of the tree get unlocked by certain in-game actions so that you have to, so the thinking here was okay, and maybe this wasn't I'm just going to pick because this was not really a fully thought through system, but let's say that you kill 500 people with a sword, and now the sword area of the skill tree opens up because you've demonstrated the fact that you're interested in specializing more into this or something like that. We kind of had this idea of slowly opening up, and the idea was that you could see adjacent chunks and what the conditions were that would unlock them, and then we even thought maybe what you could do is have it so that once a chunk was unlocked on one character, that it's unlocked for all your characters, so that you've kind of got this idea of you're slowly unlocking the whole tree for your account or something like that.
I mean,
we just had these vague ideas.
That's really close to masteries. The idea of you go through the ascendancies and you go through the gauntlet, and then you get another smaller skill tree that you're able to build onto and add to by getting points from doing that. So while everyone in the chat's saying, no, don't lock off specific areas.
Oh, no. I'm not saying we'll do that now.
Achieving something is great.
Right. So what I actually quite liked this back when I first proposed it, but the reason I was talked out of it, there's a few reasons, and probably the reasons that a lot of the people in chat will be having, right? They are valid concerns to have. So there's a lot of it comes down to the fact that we felt that showing the whole skill tree was the least bad option as far as wanting to have a skill tree like this is concerned. I don't think that there would be a way to have a skill tree like this without doing it where you can see the whole thing like this. Now, in order for that to not be the case, you'd have to fundamentally change the skill tree in some other way. So the thing I just said, for example, that has the locked off stuff, there would be a way to not have this problem, but it would fundamentally change the skill tree in ways that I think Path of Exile players probably wouldn't like. And so therefore, in the discussion came up again for PoE2, should we try and change the skill tree in a way where you don't have this moment of opening up the skill tree and it's this big thing? Now, I am now of the opinion that this is so iconic for Path of Exile that I don't think it's something that we could change. Like, it actually would kill a lot of the the giant skill tree that you see when you open up that moment of discovery when you first open it up is actually iconic enough that it's become a thing in of itself in some way. That's part of the Path of Exile experience in some level, is like that moment. So I don't think I would want to get rid of that. I think it is actually sort of important, but at the same time there is that niggle of annoyingness where I'm like, I agree with you on some level that you want the complexity to slowly evolve over time. And the trouble with a skill tree like this is the fact that, okay, like, no matter how simple, no matter how understandable you make options, if you have 1,000 of them, then the complexity is in which ones should I pick. So there may, it isn't probably possible to make a simple but giant passive skill tree. So yeah, that's the tricky part about it. Now we are going to improve all the things we can improve as far as being able to understand the stats, and we've got things that can show you what the exact result of allocating them are and things like that. There's a lot of pitfalls we can improve and so on there. But once again, it's very hard to make it so that the thing that you don't necessarily want to open up a build guide. Now, the next question is, okay, there are build guides on the internet. There are always going to be build guides no matter what you do, right? So the question entirely is, do we want to disencourage, encourage, not sure which way round you look at it, but do we want to encourage not looking at them? That's an interesting question.
Take a player out of the game itself, they're suddenly metagaming the mechanics within the game. One example that I was given about, because I love the complexity of the skill tree. I do. I genuinely do love it as a whole thing. I think what was difficult for me was that moment of seeing it and being immediately overwhelmed. So I would love it if there was even just a slight ramp up to the level of overwhelm instead of having it thrown at me. Because as soon as I opened it, someone said that just the simplicity of having it zoomed in as soon as you open it instead of opening it to an already zoomed out state. So I think the default is opening it zoomed out.
You're actually wrong about that. You're actually wrong about it. It does open zoomed in, and then you have to zoom out manually.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But everyone does. A couple of years ago.
Everyone does, though.
Okay. But one of the ideas that we looked at and that I was discussing, this actually comes from martial arts many, many years ago. If I've got it wrong, I'll go back and watch the video I've got. But if I've got it wrong, then I've got it wrong, and I experienced it and remember it wrong. But one thing that I remember vividly from a martial arts lesson was the instructor saying to me, if you walk around the corner and somebody surprise attacks you, even if you know what to do in that situation, because you've had no preparation for it, you are at a massive disadvantage. If you were walking around the corner and someone grabbed you just 5 seconds before and said, hey, there's a guy around there waiting for you, that tiny bit of preparation gives my brain the chance to prepare for what it's about to see, access the bits that it needs, and then go around the corner with an expectation of what I'm about to do. So when this huge, big sphere grid, this level up system is shown to me, I am not expecting the complexity of it. If there was a level to maybe have the first or second level up be tutorialized, if you will, of saying, hey, go here, here, or here for a general build. Choose this one for a melee class, this one for a ranged class, this one for a magic class. And then the next level up from that was maybe slightly tutorialized. Let's say you went into magic. Do you want to increase your magical shield or your magical damage? Once you've done those two, you can then say to the player, right, the rest of this is about to unlock for you. Good luck with it. And then it kind of zooms out. It would have set my expectations for what I need to do and the level of complexity I'm about to deal with. Is there a way that you can set player expectations for the complexity they're about to be faced with in a way that wouldn't intimidate them?
Well, are you then in favor of the fog of war idea, but basically at the start, so you just can't see the whole rest of the tree right at the beginning, and then it kind of shows you it at some point?
I think if a player takes the initiative to want to zoom out instead of following a tutorial idea of click one of these three where it's quite zoomed in, like if they say I'm going to actively take the initiative of seeing how complicated this can be, then they should be allowed to do that. So let's imagine that it zooms in, you've got the three choices that you can do, and then there's a little tick box in the corner saying tutorial on. Level up tutorial for the first 3 levels, yes, no. And as soon as you click no, zooms out, you can do it again. So a brand new player has a choice of playing through a simplified start, but an experienced player can straight away turn it off and go, I know what I'm doing, let's just get straight to it.
So if you just play a random RPG and you open the map and the map is zoomed in around where you are, what's the first thing you do?
You zoom out.
Exactly.
But then away, I've got the
moment
idea of
there is
being
the ability
zoomed
to
in.
zoom out.
I'm prepared for the map. I mean, the first, let's say the first map on old school RuneScape is the tutorial island, which is a very small zone that introduces you to moving about on the map itself. I mean, even in Dark Souls, the very first zone is the Undead Asylum, which is a very small, concentrated version of the rest of the game. Elden Ring, when you first walk out into Limgrave and you've got that huge big open world in front of you, but you've already fought some enemies to get there, and now you're ready to do it.
I guess the thing that they do, though, typically in a game like that is that the points of interest, as it were, tend to be only appearing as you get closer to that area of the map. So that means that all you can really see is just the visuals. I don't really know what the analog would quite be on a passive skill tree for something like that. Like you could theoretically have something where you can see vaguely. I don't know. It doesn't quite work. It is a problem I would love to solve, but it really is one that I like thinking about it. I do find it very hard to come up with something that I think that both the players would like and also feels like Path of Exile and also has this like problem solved. You know, like it is actually quite, it is tough.
And we're not going to solve this. I'm definitely not going to solve this. You guys have had years to think about this.
Aren't we though? You never know.
We might find an idea because your specialization is finding bad ideas and not doing them. And my specialization is coming up with a lot of ideas. So if I come up with a lot of ideas, 99% will be bad, but eventually I'll say something randomly off the cuff. You'll turn around and go, that's not great itself, but we can work with it. And then we mold it into something that might actually be quite useful. People are saying in the chat that the point of the complexity of the skill tree is to effectively scare away players who aren't going to like the game as a whole. And it's
not necessarily something I fully agree with.
I don't agree with that. I would like new players. I love Path of Exile. I love the gameplay of it. I love the vibe of it. I love the story, the narrative, the level up system. I think it's a great game. I just want to get rid of those tiny quit moments that would make a player that isn't convinced it's for them stick with it a little bit longer until they then turn around and say, actually, no, I get it now. There's that moment of, I get it now. And we want to keep people playing until that happens.
I want to give you one other analog to this, though, that is going in the opposite direction, just as another point here, which is that what we've found is that, for example, if you don't die in a game till like level 30, then the expectation is that you don't die, and then when you die, you feel frustrated. Whereas if you kill the player very early on, then the expectation is that you die, and it sets that expectation for the rest of the game. And so I suppose you could argue a similar thing with the skill tree of that, like if the expectation is this is going to be a game with big skill trees that you have to make choices in, then you could argue that sort of sets an expectation that you then meet for the rest of the game. Whereas maybe if you get to level 30, for example,
but you don't die to the first enemy.
10, you get to level 10 and then suddenly there's a giant skill tree, like, shit. And then like now it's like, oh, this isn't the game I thought I was playing, and now you actually feel worse about it. It's sort of hard to know though.
But could we pace the skill tree exposure the same as the death exposure? Because for me, I would say the most deaths in Path of Exile 1, especially to casual players, the first part of the beach is fine. You get to the first kind of hub zone, then you go out onto the beach, and the second beach bit, there's an enemy that I think casts fire on you and just throws a ton of kind of AoE fire around you. That's the kind of one that I'm thinking of. All the mud flats, as soon as you get to it, that's when you die. So you've had the first bit, we totally get it. I mean, the first exposure to links and gems is tutorialized. Get them, put them there, put them there, put them there, they link together. I would love it if the skill tree, which so far seems to be the biggest sticking point, if you will, though, for new players, was exposed in the same way as the death, like you've said. You don't kill them straight away, but you do kill them early, or you do make it a challenge early and give them the chance to die early. So maybe the skill tree slowly grows in complexity over the first half an hour of gameplay.
Yeah, I just need to find. I would need to come up with a way to make it happen. And as I said, it's a very difficult one. It really is.
The search function, by the way, is fantastic. We can all, every single person in the chat can collectively agree the search box on the skill tree to search for specific words is fantastic. We are all collectively in agreement that's a good choice. Jonathan, was that you?
I don't think it was.
You could have said yes. You would have had the chat entirely on your side. You could have taken that glory, but you didn't. Thank you for being honest.
But the one that is me and will be new in PoE2 that I'm actually very proud of is the fact that now you can see the difference to your character from hovering over any skill in PoE2. So you can press shift and you'll get here's the stat changes that will result, and specifically here are the DPS differences that will result in all of your skills from allocating the skill point. So that will actually, I think, aid a lot of people. And we're even going to have that for equipping items and even leveling up gems. And basically anywhere where a stat would change, there'll be a preview to be able to see what the result of that change will be before you do it. So that one I will take credit for getting that sorted out. And that's one I think will help for sure.
Perfect. Beautiful. I'm a big fan of whenever I hover over a piece of equipment, an item or weapon or armor, I hold shift and I can see the changes in, what I'm currently wearing, what that is, what'll go up, what'll go down, because that way I am given information and I feel like I'm making the choice correctly. I feel like I'm making the choice with all available information, and that is right for me. And if that's a bad choice, that's then on me, not on the game. Is it going to be slightly easier to respec in Path of Exile 2 if you suddenly decide you don't like what you've built into?
Yeah, so we've already talked a bit about how we're going to use gold to do the respec system.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really have anything like that before that could quite make that work. That should make it easier. What we of course have to work out is what the balance of this is, because I'm always been a proponent of the fact that respecking should be a journey. When it is a thing where you just push a button and you respect and there's no and there's nothing to it at all, I often have experienced myself a big feeling of dislocation from my character where I no longer identify with it anymore. And especially what's annoying is that when you reallocate everything all at once, you get into the situation where you can often feel like, like it just never quite feels right again. This may not be the experience that everyone gets, but the whole just like push a button, your character's fully respec, you reallocate everything again moment has just been very dislocating for me. So I much prefer the journey. And we're doing it with gold prices in PoE2. That will mean that it's cheaper the earlier you do it. And that should mean that, the thing a lot of people say is just it's the early game respecking that they're more concerned about. So that kind of does achieve that. And, who would have guessed that having gold in an RPG would be a useful mechanic? That turns out there are reasons. Took you a couple of
years, but you guys went, what? They're probably onto something here.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an old game I played years ago. I can't remember the exact one it was, but respecking had you fight yourself. And I forget which game it was. If I find out, I'll let you know. There was if you chose to respec, it was an old RPG, you had to go through like a gauntlet of enemies, and the final boss was you, exactly as you are, with your own kind of weapons and your own stats, but you had evil you had unlimited health, and the more damage you could do to evil you in this fight, the more kind of skill points you would effectively rip away from yourself when the fight finished. And when the fight finished and you finally died, you showed how much damage you did to you, and this is how many skill points you've now managed to take away from yourself, and you can choose to reallocate them already there. That was really cool, because if you were super powerful, respecking was then relatively difficult because you had to fight super powered you. Whereas if you were mid-level, fighting mid-level you was actually okay because you didn't have all the skills, and the computer used to play you really well.
Where I thought you were going with that was that you did your respec, and then to lock it in, you had to beat yourself with your old build. And then the theory being that you have to be able to be better than what you were before you did you have to prove that your respec is better than what you had before.
That would be cool. Kind of interesting idea. If there is a kind of league in the future where you have to fight an evil mirror version of you, I'm taking full credit for that. That's our idea then. Jonathan, we made it right now. Evil version in the future, we can do it.